Hello, listeners, and thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Giract Around the Coffee Table podcast. During this podcast series, we'll be diving deep into the trends and the very hottest topics shaping the ingredients industry. We'll be joined by guests who bring their own viewpoints on the biggest issues of the day, as well as Giract's in-house experts, and that is to say, our own analysts, to bring you deep insights into the specific subject areas we are studying. So in today's episode, I'm delighted to announce that I'm joined around the Giract coffee table by Flaminia Ortenzi, a senior research associate within the Healthier Diets Research Unit at the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, which many of our listeners may know more commonly as GAIN. So welcome, Flaminia, and thank you for joining me today. Now,
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Not at all, not at all. So, in fact, many of our listeners will already know both, perhaps you and perhaps GAIN, both from the conferences as well as the work that GAIN does around the globe. But in fact, many may not. So, could I ask you just to give a quick introduction to yourself and a quick introduction to GAIN?
Sure. Thank you again. It's really a pleasure to be here. So I'm Flaminia Ortenzi. My background is in food science and human nutrition and global health. I work as a senior research associate for the Global Alliance, as you already introduced. And most of my work really focuses on micronutrient deficiencies and undernutrition, especially in low and middle income country settings, but more broadly also globally. And lately, a big part of my work has also transitioned towards sustainability issues related to food systems and diets, encompassing all aspects of sustainability, so ranging from environmental to socioeconomic to social cultural dimensions of the sustainability profiling of foods and diets. I've also recently started a PhD, which deals with the same kinds of issues and topics. So really at the intersection, at the nexus between diets and sustainability.
Right. Okay. Fascinating. Thank you. Yeah. So today's podcast is all about nutrition, obviously, but more specifically, how to deliver adequate nutrition for all people while ensuring sustainability. So, I mean, maybe to start off with a very broad canvas, what are micronutrients and what are micronutrient deficiencies?
That's a tough question. I could go on and on about it for forever, but to simplify, so micronutrients are compounds that we need in small quantities, unlike other dietary components that everyone is probably familiar with, such as proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, which are the ones that we always think about when we eat. We usually track macros and think of calories. So micronutrients do not provide calories, but they help us break down the food in order to get energy from it. And they also help us maintain our bodies healthy. They help with growth and development in children. They help with healthy aging in the elderly. They help with healing in the case of sickness or in the case of wounds and injuries. They play a lot of regulatory roles in our organisms. They help regulate metabolism, reproductive function, immune function, cognitive function. They basically are involved in every single function that our bodies play, every single role. But they're needed in smaller quantities, and those smaller quantities are really critical. And what happens when we don't get enough of them is that we incur deficiencies or inadequacies, which again, most people do not think about when we think of undernutrition. We usually think of pictures of stunted children or underweight women that are very thin and whose bones are popping out, and with a round belly because of hydration and lack of hydration and nutrients. We don't think of undernutrition in terms of hidden undernutrition, which is micronutrient deficiencies and inadequacies. But those are really severe and they're a big problem globally. So just to give you a few high-level numbers and figures, there's about 1 in 2 children that are deficient in at least one essential micronutrient, and about 2 in 3 women of reproductive age globally that are deficient in at least one micronutrient. Deficiencies can cause a range of health problems that go from tiredness, lack of energy, lack of focus and concentration, to much more severe issues such as anemia, which affects about 30% of the global female population of reproductive age, or bone issues such as low bone density, which is very common, especially in the elderly and especially in women, again, scurvy, which people think is by now eradicated, but it is actually still present in many parts of the world, and that derives from lack of vitamin C deficiency, and it's actually a very severe disease. Thyroid problems, difficulties in terms of cognitive development, which affect many children globally and are linked to zinc deficiency, iron deficiency, calcium deficiency, etc. So they're really severe and affecting a large proportion of the global population, not only in developing countries, but also in the global north where we live.
Right, okay, thank you. Yeah, those are quite shocking numbers, actually. I think most people won't realize they're quite so high. And I certainly didn't realize that scurvy was still a significant issue, actually. Like you say, I
Yeah.
assumed it had been eradicated.
Yeah.
But
Mm-mm.
okay, yeah. But I mean, nutritional products, nutritional consumer goods, for example, they've diversified so much from the standard, slimming or weight loss products that dominated the market in the 1970s and 1980s. I mean, just to give a few examples, back in the year 2000, registrations of dietary supplements with the Food and Drug Administration were growing by about 3.5% each year. And in fact, comparing that in 2023, registered products of these dietary supplements were growing by up to about 12%. So it's estimated there's well over 50,000 different dietary supplement products alone available on the market, catering to various different deficiencies. So with all of these products available, surely we're all eating healthy by now, aren't we?
Yeah, those are some impressive figures as well. But unfortunately, no, we're not all eating healthy. I wish we were. That would mean that I would have much less work and that the world would be a much better place. But no, that's not the case. There's a variety of reasons why. As you said, the market offers a lot. But there's several questions about, first of all, who can benefit from what the market offers and from the various options and products that are available. And there's a second question as to who wants those options and is interested in purchasing them and even paying a premium price for obtaining those products. And those are all important questions. And then obviously there's another question about whether people are aware of the importance of those products and are aware of the prevalence of micronutrient deficiencies, especially in the global north, where we all think that we're eating sufficient nutrients to sustain ourselves. And it's actually often not the case. So one big driver, one big reason why we're not eating healthy is affordability. Very often products that are unhealthy are cheaper than healthier options or more nutrient dense options or premium quality options, which means that there's big chunks of the population, even in high income countries, that are not able to afford a healthy diet. And we're talking billions of people, not a small proportion of the global population, including, as I said, in the global north. Another big driver is availability in specific areas, geographic areas, or again, segments of the population. For example, I live in Switzerland and I'm very lucky because I can just exit the door of my house and find a supermarket right in front of me. But that's not the case for many parts of the world. Even in developed countries, for example, in the US, there's a common phenomenon which is called food deserts, meaning that people are not able to find healthy food, like nutritious foods, for kilometers and kilometers and need to drive hours in order to reach a place that offers them decent options and diversity. So this is still something that persists in our societies. And then obviously there's a problem of misinformation and wrong marketing that comes from both industries and social media and influencers. And we hear weird and conflicting and contrasting messages every day. And there's one person that says that high protein is great, and another one that says that no, what we need is actually to avoid fat, and then another one that says oh, actually, what we need is mostly fruits and vegetables. And then contrasting messages are confusing for people, and they also cause distrust in science and in official scientific communications that come, for example, from the government or even from health professionals that we might go and ask for advice to. And then obviously there is a matter of taste and preferences. In many countries, certain products are simply not acceptable yet or not widely diffused because people do not like them or because they don't taste good enough. So there's also there a role for the industry to play, obviously, to make some of these products more desirable or the most desirable choice over alternatives which are less healthy, more calorie dense, but less nutrient dense.
Right. Okay. Okay. Interesting. Thanks. So all of that, I suppose, is aligned somewhat with our eating habits in the global north. And a lot of that seems quite distinct from sort of the food fortification programs that we tend to associate with the global south. Is this sort of a misinterpretation, or are they somewhat similar, actually?
No, absolutely. That's fully correct. So the fortified products or nutrient dense or enhanced products that we see in the global north are not at all similar to food fortification programs in the global south.
Right.
So those are programs built to, first of all, targeted to populations that are highly deficient, very often where deficiencies are not just widespread, but very severe, and where large proportions of the population, for example, children, are stunted, women are not productive at work due to severe deficiencies. And those programs primarily target foods that are already commonly consumed within those countries. So we're talking about flour, oil, sugar, salt, like basic, really foundational products that are part of everyone's everyday diets. That are fortified with nutrients that are commonly lacking in those societies. So normally the way that large-scale fortification programs are built is that first of all, there's a formative research stage where the government or other institutions scope out which are the most commonly lacking nutrients and which are the foods that are most commonly consumed every day by households in those countries. And then those are the foods that are being fortified with the specific nutrients that are lacking in those societies or populations. And again, here we're not talking about, I don't know, fancy protein bars with added nutrients, but we're rather talking about wheat flour or maize that are being
Yeah.
fortified for staple daily consumption.
Okay. Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. So until now, this has all been on nutrition. And at the outset of the podcast, we said we'd also be looking at how to combine that with sustainability. So, what does all this have to do with sustainability?
Yeah, thank you. This is a question that's really dear to my heart and the core of my work at the moment. It has a lot to do with sustainability. First of all, we all know that animal source foods are dense in many nutrients that are essential and that are commonly lacking in diets. We're talking about iron, calcium, zinc, vitamin B12, which is actually exclusively found in animal source foods, vitamin D as well, and many others. Those nutrients are found in larger quantities and also more bioavailable, meaning more absorbable forms. So they're ready for use, let's say, by humans for all metabolic functions that they're involved in. Unfortunately, we also all know that animal source foods are among the most environmentally impactful foods out there. They're also among the most unaffordable foods out there. And this means that there's a sustainability trade-off and that fulfilling nutrient needs may not always be compatible with protecting planetary health and with ensuring affordability of diets to the global population. Why do they talk so much about animal source foods? We hear all the time nowadays that we need to shift towards more plant-based diets, plant-based alternatives, legumes, meat alternatives, alternative proteins, insects, microalgae, and the more the better. Well, obviously, this is very promising from an environmental impact perspective. And it promises to bring about large benefits from a resource preservation and ecosystem services quality perspective. But from a nutritional perspective, well, there may be a problem. because many plant source foods lack essential nutrients that are commonly available in animal source foods, or contain them in smaller quantities or in less bioavailable forms, meaning that we can absorb less of them. And there's been several studies that have been conducted during the past few years that demonstrate that plant source or plant-based diets are often inadequate in many of the nutrients that I just mentioned, which are so essential to our health. So how do we manage to balance out this trade-off and to achieve multiple objectives and fulfill multiple priorities and targets? Well, we can't completely rule out animal source foods because, as I said, they're essential to the diets of many people globally. They're culturally acceptable. They're part of our gastronomy and traditions. They have been so for centuries. But at the same time, we can't continue eating the same quantities that we're eating now, or otherwise we're going to be destroying the environment and continuing down the very impactful route that food systems are currently on. So there needs to be a series of solutions that come and complement one another that are applied together. So we definitely can rely on fortification to help us fulfill nutrient requirements for large populations at scale in an environmentally friendly and affordable way, because adding premixes to foods is relatively low in terms of environmental impacts and is also relatively cheap. Especially with new production technologies that allow to produce nutrients at scale with low cost and low environmental impacts. We definitely do need supplementation, which is also very important, especially in low middle income country context, but also in certain populations in the global north. We also need biofortification, which is an emerging solution that's being promoted more and more because it can make crops more nutrient dense and more environmentally resilient. But we also need dietary change, and to ensure that everyone is aware of what we need to eat for our health and for the planet, without completely ruling out animal source foods, but moderating consumption and choosing the ones that are the most nutrient dense and that are the most environmentally friendly. And instead ruling out all of the stuff that's just taking up calories without giving us any nutrition. And that's the case of many unhealthy snacks or fast foods that have entered the diets, not just of the global north, but also of the global south in many, many countries and in many population pockets.
Right, I see. Okay, yeah. That's much more multifaceted than I think most people appreciate for the nutritional space, where people just tend to associate it with dietary supplements, for instance, or fortification. That's a fascinating insight to the work you're doing. Thank you, Flaminia. I mean, I'd be delighted, obviously, to sit and discuss this with you all day, but sadly, that brings us to the end of this particular episode. But of course, we can obviously expand the discussion into another episode at some point soon. I know there's an awful lot of work you're doing, and it's fascinating, and it would be delightful to discuss it with you again. So in that case, I'd like to thank you, Flaminia, as well as all of you, our listeners, for joining me today around the Giract coffee table. As always, it's been thoroughly enjoyable. So do tune into the next episode of the Giract Around the Coffee Table podcast, which will be available on Spotify and YouTube at the end of July. So until then, thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you so much.